Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a seriously dramatic underdog story. I'm talking about a rejected, completely misunderstood piece of technology that somehow rose from the ashes to literally define the sound of an entire decade. We are unpacking the wild history of the Yamaha DX7. Let's kick things off with a simple question. When you think of the 1980s, what does it actually sound like to you? Take a second. Imagine the defining hits of that era. You know, the glittering, emotional pop ballads, or those incredibly punchy, driving bass lines from massive blockbuster movie soundtracks. But have you ever actually stopped to wonder where those iconic, crystal clear sounds came from? Well, let's get into it. So back in the early 1980s, the reality of music production was completely dominated by these massive analog synthesizers. And hey, they sounded incredible for sure, but they were super elitist. I mean, we're talking about instruments that cost as much as a luxury car. Plus, you needed huge amounts of electricity and specialized technicians just to keep the things running. So the impossible dream for engineers everywhere was to create something compact, digital, and affordable. But experts at the time were pretty blunt. They basically said that creating beautiful digital sound might be theoretically possible on paper, but practically, no way. Just impossible. Chapter 1, Analog Dominance and an Accidental Discovery. To trace the true origin of our beloved 80s sound, we actually have to rewind all the way back to 1967. Picture this, a quiet corner of the Artificial Intelligence Lab at Stanford University. A musician and researcher named John Choing is running lonely experiments on this massive, room-sized computer. And one night, he makes a mistake. He accidentally cranks up the speed of a vibrato setting way, way too high. Now, according to the logic of the day, doing this should have just spit out a terrible, harsh noise. But instead, the speaker projected this crystal-clear, stunningly beautiful metallic tone. It sounded like a bell from some distant galaxy. It's just wild to me that this was the accidental discovery of frequency modulation, or FM synthesis. Basically, it's the digital alchemy of crashing two simple waves together at incredibly high speeds to generate these complex, completely natural-sounding tones. Naturally, Chowning believes he's sitting on a digital gold mine that could, in theory, replicate an entire orchestra. So he takes his revolutionary patent straight to the absolute titans of the American keyboard industry, giants like Hammond and Wurlitzer. And what do they say? They literally tell him, this isn't music, it's electrical noise. Seriously, because the tech didn't perfectly mimic a traditional pipe organ or an acoustic piano, these massive companies completely dismissed it. And just like that, the patent was abandoned and left to gather dust. Chapter 2, The Fates of the Abandoned Patent. So while the American music corporations completely turned their backs on this tech, a lone Japanese engineer decided to cross the Pacific. His name was Kazuo Ishimura, and he worked for Yamaha. Now, at the time, Yamaha was mostly known for acoustic pianos and motorcycles. Ishimura was on a special mission to research American music tech, and he manages to score a meeting with Dr. Chowning at Stanford. And here is where the story shifts. Where the American executives only heard strange metallic noise, Ishimura instantly saw a deeply elegant mathematical solution. He grasped the pure brilliance of FM synthesis in like 10 minutes. He realized this math could generate infinite, incredibly rich sounds entirely through pure calculation. It completely eliminated the need for those massive, bulky circuits that analog synthesizers relied on. Chapter 3, The Mad In-House Project. Okay, so Yamaha buys the patent, but honestly, the real nightmare was just beginning. Think about it. Turning room-sized computer code into a portable musical instrument required a level of processing power that simply did not exist in standard chips back then. And outsourcing the chip manufacturing, that would cost an absolute fortune. So Yamaha makes a decision that frankly seems completely reckless and, well, mad. They decided to build their very own semiconductor factory from scratch, just to manufacture the chips capable of processing these formulas. Looking at the timeline, from that accidental discovery in 1967, it sparked this grueling development phase starting in 1974. You had artisans who were used to carving wood for pianos, painstakingly hand-drawing complex integrated circuits. It took 7 exhausting years of extreme, obsessive dedication to create the world's best sound before they finally had a working prototype in 1981. And that prototype was the GS1. Now, the sound was revolutionary. We're talking top international pros like Stevie Wonder absolutely loving it. But the specs? Completely wild. It weighed 90 kilograms and cost an eye-watering 2.6 million yen. So it was basically still just a rich person's toy, really no different from the elite analog synths of the era. The project leader knew this wasn't good enough. He demanded they shrink it down, setting the ultimate goal. It had to be lightweight, and it had to be affordable enough for everyday youth to actually buy. Chapter 4, The 4 Days of Destiny.
All right, picture this. It's 1982. Yamaha has finally finished the physical hardware for their new synth, but there's a huge problem. The machine is completely silent. There are zero sounds programmed into it. So, to fix this, they invite two foreign sound programming experts, Dave Bristow and Gary Leuenberger, to an isolated training facility deep in the mountains of Hamamatsu. And they hand them a borderline impossible mission: create 128 factory preset sounds in just 4 days. Now remember, on analog synths, you just intuitively twist a physical knob to shape the sound. Not here. This machine was a total programming nightmare. They were staring at a tiny little LCD screen, a flat keypad, and this deeply complex mathematical system of 6 operators and 32 algorithms. Entering just one wrong numerical value, from 0 to 99, could instantly turn a gorgeous tone into harsh, ear-piercing static.
You can imagine exhaustion was setting in incredibly fast, but late one night in that mountain facility, Gary was trying to program an electric piano. And instead of trying to perfectly mimic a real traditional piano, he decided to lean into the tech. He deliberately emphasized the cold, metallic, crystal-clear attack of the keystroke. The result was incredibly emotional and highly responsive to exactly how hard the keys were struck. And in that magical moment, the legendary E-Piano 1 preset was born. It was a sound that didn't just mimic reality, it completely outshined it. Chapter 5: The Disruption That Changed Music. Fast forward to the summer of 1983 at a massive musical instrument trade show in Chicago. Surrounded by these giant, incredibly expensive, imposing American analog synthesizers, Yamaha quietly unveils this strange, flat, knobless keyboard, the DX7. At first, buyers literally just walked right past it. They assumed it was some cheap toy because it was so shockingly small and light. But then, someone put on the headphones and played a chord. That crystalline, unbelievably rich digital sound literally stopped people dead in their tracks. And then they looked at the price tag: $1,995. That was less than half, and in some cases, literally a tenth of the price of its analog competitors. It instantly, overnight, shattered the industry's golden rule that high quality always required a high price. Chapter 6: The Legacy Echoing Today. The DX7 didn't just have a successful launch, it fundamentally democratized music production. Think about it. Suddenly, amateur musicians jamming in tiny, cramped apartments could afford the exact same world-class, professional sounds that were being used in multi-million-dollar recording studios in London and LA. It leveled the playing field overnight. And its cultural footprint? Absolutely staggering. That electrical noise that was completely rejected by the old guard literally became the soundtrack of our daily lives. You can hear it sparkling in Whitney Houston's pop ballads. You hear it driving the hard bass line of the Top Gun theme. Its descendant FM chips even powered the funky background music of the 16-bit Sega Mega Drive. And yep, even those classic polyphonic ringtones we all had on our early mobile phones. It was everywhere. Now, I did find a super fascinating little footnote to this incredible success story. Because those 32 algorithms and mathematical interfaces were so unbelievably difficult for everyday musicians to master, a massive secondary market just exploded. Sound designers and famous musicians started selling secondary ROM cartridges, kind of like old video game cartridges, but filled with new sound presets. The instrument was just so mathematically complex that most people opted to buy these cartridges to get new sounds rather than risking programming it themselves. It's such a funny twist to the story. Well, we've reached the end of our explainer. But, the story of the DX7 really isn't just a story about microchips, frequency modulation, and synthesizers. At its core, it's about those nameless, obsessive engineers who took a piece of rejected math and worked sleepless nights to turn the totally impossible into reality. Their underdog spirit enriched the world's musical landscape forever. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Does that fierce passion, that unrelenting drive to do what no one else will, still live on today? Think about that, and keep your curiosity alive.